Hi, welcome to Right to Top. I'm Adam. Today's video is actually part 2 of the present perfect tense. You can watch the other video, part 1, about when to use the present perfect and what situations. Today, we're going to look more specifically at time expressions that go with the present perfect. Now, the reason I want to focus on the time expressions is because this is where a lot of people make mistakes when using the present perfect tense. Now, what do I mean by time expressions? Well, let's look at the ones we're going to look at. Since and for, already, yet, and still. And then especially the ones that are inherent in the verb. And I'm gonna explain that as we go along. And then a few more. Recently, just, always, never, and over. So these are the time expressions that we are going to use with the present perfect. And it's very important to know how to use them, when to use them, and to make sure that you match your present perfect verb with these time expressions. Okay, so we're going to start with since and for. Now, I know that a lot of you who have taken ESL classes or have learned English somewhere have always learned about since and for, when to use each of them. Since for a specific time, for a period of time. While that's true, it's not as simple as all that. So we're going to start with since. There's a few times when you're going to use the time expression since. Yes, it is a specific starting point in the past, okay? That's when the action happened until now and will continue. But there's more than one way to express that specific starting point. Of course, there's time. The computers have been down since this morning. This morning is a specific time in the past, or since 10 this morning, okay? So you're looking at a specific time in the past, that's your starting point, and everything has happened since then, or the situation has continued since then. Same for day or date. Monday, day, the 17th, date. The mail hasn't been delivered since Monday. Starting Monday until now, the mail has not been delivered. You can also look at a situation or an event in the past or in history. The world of retail business has changed dramatically since the invention of the internet. Now, if you want to go and look when the internet was invented in the 80s, that's fine. But you know more or less when this event happened, okay? When this invention came to the public eye, right? So that is a specific time in the past, and that's why we use it with since. It doesn't have to be a time or a date. It could be a situation, and especially we're going to look at the next two. It could be with an adverb clause or a phrase, okay? So we're going to look at the time adverb clause. Now, when you're using since with a clause as a time marker, since is the conjunction of the time adverb clause. Just like when, after, before, these are all conjunctions for time adverb clauses. Since is also used, but you use since when you have a present perfect tense. You use when you have a simple past tense. Okay? Let's look at the example. Incidents of bullying at our schools have decreased sharply since the board introduced a zero tolerance policy. So let's look at the clause first. Since is your conjunction. The board is the subject. Introduced is the verb. Zero tolerance policy is your object. So there's your full clause. And all of this whole clause is giving you the time marker for the have decreased main verb. Okay? So you don't always have to have a specific time or a date. And that's where a lot of people make mistakes. They forget that you can have a clause as your specific starting point. So be very careful about that. Now I'm talking specifically about writing. Now, when you're writing an English test like IELTS, TOEFL, CAE, FCE, whatever, these are things that they're going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for your control of verbs. And one of the things that makes or breaks your verb usage is your use of time expressions, and especially the ones with the clauses. Now, keep in mind another thing, you're serving two functions in terms of your scoring. One, you have a correct use of the verb, good grammar, plus you also have a complex sentence with an independent clause and a dependent clause. So keep that in mind. You can kill two birds with one stone. Same thing goes with a time phrase. Now here you have to be careful because since technically is a conjunction, but you don't have a clause. You have a reduced clause, a participle phrase. So a participle phrase happens when you take a clause, an adjective clause or an adverb clause, and you squeeze the subject and the verb into a participle, ing or past participle. Since taking his post last year, the new commissioner has hardly made any changes in personnel. So since he took his post last year, that's what's understood in taking. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. Now, another thing I want to point out, the verb, the simple verb in the clause, and remember it has to be a simple past verb in the time clause to work as a time expression. The simple past verb in the time clause doesn't need its own time marker. Okay, so he took his post last year. Here I have one, but since the board introduced a zero tolerance policy, when did they do it? Doesn't matter. That's not what is relevant, because the introduced is not the main verb. Have decreased is the main verb, and it takes the time expression of the clause. Okay, I hope this comes across a little bit clear. Let's look at a couple more examples. Okay, actually, before we go on, I just want to make sure we also understand that the time expression can come at the beginning of the clause or after the clause. So I can say the world of retail business, I'm looking at again the situation, has changed dramatically since the invention of the internet, or since the invention of the internet, the world of retail business has changed dramatically. The only thing to be careful about is make sure that your time expression is complete and together, and your main clause is complete and together. Although sometimes we're going to have situations where they're not, okay? Let's look at the next one. Okay, now I also want to talk about ever since and then never, and then comma since, but you're going to see the difference. Ever since he found out his wife was going to have a baby, that means expecting, pregnant, James has not had a drop of alcohol. Now, I could say, since he found out his wife was expecting, James has not had. The reason I would use ever before the since is to emphasize this whole time, since the moment he found out until now, the whole time he has not touched a drop of alcohol, right? So the ever is only there to emphasize. That's its only function. So don't worry about if you use it or don't use it. If you're not sure, don't use it. If you are sure and you want to emphasize, go ahead. Now, never cannot go never since. You don't put the two together. So let's look at the example. Never, since polling first took place over half a century ago, has a new president fared so poorly in public opinion. Now, the actual sentence is, never has a new president fared. The never goes with the clause. Since polling, notice it's between commas. This means I'm taking it out. This is just an extra piece of information. The never doesn't go with the since. The since is its own expression of time, and then it's just giving you a little bit extra, and it doesn't really go with the verb itself. So don't mix the two. Now, in terms of when to use never and ever and always, etc., we're going to look at that a little bit later. Now, let's look at the last example here. Many of the staff have noticed when we don't need a time expression. We're going to look at that in part 1 of video 1 about when to use present perfect. Many of the staff have noticed that since Peter Howe took over control of the company and decided to prepare it for a public offering, the office culture has changed, becoming colder, more efficient, etc. Now, the thing you have to be careful about is sometimes you're going to have your since very far away from your present perfect verb. You still have to remember that they go together, that since begins a time expression. Now, the time expression can be very long. It could be a compound clause, as we have here with the and. Since Peter Howe took and decided to. So he's done two things. So if you're going to have a long distance, don't forget to match your main verb from your independent clause with the time expression. So a lot of people will write, since Peter Howe took over control of the company and decided to prepare it for a public offering, the offer culture changed, becoming. But it has changed because we're using since, okay? Be very careful about distances between things that work together. Not only for present perfect, other situations as well. Now, let's look at for. When we use the time expression beginning with for, we're always looking at a period of time, a collection of time. Now, the most common is the time units, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. These are set units of time, and they go easily with for. The machines have run trouble-free for 3 weeks straight, or for the past 3 weeks straight. Of course, I can use have been running trouble-free, that's fine. But I just want to show you that the key here is For 3 weeks. That's a set amount of time. For 2 days. For 2 years. Whatever you want to use, make sure you have a unit of time with for. Again, you can also use a time adverb clause. The difference between for and since is that for is not a conjunction. Okay? For needs the conjunction to begin the adverb clause. So the most common one, or usually the only one we use with for, is as long as. Even though the two men have done business together for as long as either of them can remember, or for as long as either of them cares to remember, the current economic climate has put a strain on their relationship. Okay? So the two men have done business together for as long as. The for as long as goes with have done business, not with has put a strain. Okay, that's two different things. The time expression goes with the clause that it's part of. Be careful about that, okay? For as long as either of them can express. So you're not going to have it separated by a comma or a different clause altogether. The time expression is going to connect directly to the clause and the verb that it's modifying. Okay? It doesn't have to be the independent clause, is what I mean. And you can also use for with an abstract period of time. It's still a period of time, but it doesn't have to be specific. Time units are specific. A certain amount of time, you can count it. Abstract time is just vague amount of time. Though management has only recently become aware of the low morale of the staff, the negative atmosphere in the office has festered for a while, for some time. Okay? How much is a while? I don't know. It's not important, but it's not too short, not that long either. So it's up to you to decide, as the reader, how long a while is or how long some time is. But generally, it's not too short, not too long. Okay? So that's for. Okay, so let's move on to the other time expressions. We're going to start with already. Now, already indicates that something has happened before something else or before it was expected to happen. So that's easy, but in terms of positioning, where do you put already? You can put it between the helping verb, has or have, and the main verb, the past participle verb. You can put it after the full verb, and if it takes an object after that, I'll talk about it in a second. And you can put it before the subject and the rest of the clause. So at the beginning of the sentence, okay? The conflict has already spiraled out of control, making UN intervention now a moot point. So a moot point means not so important anymore. We don't need to worry about UN intervention. The conflict's already out of control. So now, here, this is the most common way. Has already spiraled. Put it right between, and we're talking about it already happened before anything else can happen, before the UN intervention. Now, if you're going to put it after a full verb, that's fine. But if the verb takes a direct object, if it needs that object to be a complete verb, then you put the already after the entire package, basically. Put it after the verb, both parts of the verb and the object, and then already. The conflict has spiraled out of control already, making UN intervention. You don't say the conflict has spiraled already out of control. That doesn't work. That's incorrect. Put it after the object if the object is necessary. And if you put it right at the beginning, then it covers the whole sentence, basically. Already, the conflict has spiraled out of control, making UN intervention a moot point. So now, what's the difference? Why would you do one or the other? Basically, emphasis. When you put it between the helping verb and the main verb, it's just common. You're talking about the situation. The conflict has already spiraled out of control. So before expected or before anything could be done about it. So we're talking about the action and the UN intervention, the conflict and the intervention. We're not basically emphasizing either one. The conflict has spiraled out of control already, making. So now a little bit more focus on the out of control. And if you're putting it at the beginning, already the conflict, then you're talking about the whole situation as basically expected before anything. And whatever came before, the sentence that came before this one has a bit more emphasis on that relationship between the two. If you do any of these three, anything will be okay. It's just about emphasis. So don't worry too much about it. Just make sure that the idea gets through. That's more important. Okay? Let's look at yet. So a lot of people confuse yet and already. Already we use with affirmative sentences, positive sentences. We use net with negative sentences that have a not or a no. We use it with negatives and with questions. So yet means basically until now. So it suggests something has not happened or not been completed, but it is expected that it will be completed or that it should be completed. Okay? Researchers haven't yet been able to discover the cure for cancer. Researchers haven't been able to discover the cure for cancer yet. You could put it between the helping verb and the main or the past participle verb. You could put it at the end of the clause. Both are okay. No real difference in terms of emphasis there. In a question, when you ask a question with yet, you're expecting that something has happened or will happen. Has the package arrived yet? It means I'm expecting a package. Maybe it's come already. Maybe it will come later. I'm not sure, but I do expect it to come. So you're focusing on the action, on the arrival, not so much about the time. Now, if you want to focus on the time, use still. And it surprises me a little bit that people don't use this word very often in their writing. Basically, still means that a negative action has not happened yet when you're using it with the past perfect. If you're using it with a simple verb, then it's just a continuation of something, okay? When you're using it with the past perfect, it means that something has not happened yet, and you're still waiting for it. You're still expecting it. It should have already happened, but it hasn't. So the mayor's office still hasn't called. So they haven't called, and this non-calling continues until now, okay? The mayor's office hasn't called yet. Now, what's the difference between these two? The first one with still, it should have already happened. I was waiting for it to happen already, but it still hasn't. The second one, yet, means I wasn't really expecting any time. I just expect that it will happen when, not important, but it must happen. So the first one, focus a little bit on time. It should have already happened. Second one, just has to happen. It's about the action itself. I hope that's a little bit clearer there as well. So now, this one I see mistakes with all the time, okay? When we're talking about inherent time, there are some verbs that do not happen quickly. They take time to happen, right? And the meaning of the verb itself suggests that there's going to be a time lapse or a time span to this verb. So if the end result of the action is in the present, then the present perfect tense, the present perfect verb is used and the time expression is implied in the verb. So some of these verbs are evolve, become, develop, grow, improve. All of these verbs don't happen quickly. They must take time. They must happen in a span of time, okay? Technology has evolved to the point where machines are able to do human tasks much better than humans can. Now, do I need to say over when it started, like since when or for how long? No. The fact that it's evolved means it took time. That's all I need to know. That's all the reader needs to know. I could say technology has evolved since the beginning of civilization to the point. But we're talking about technology. We're talking about the fact that it's moved since civilization. I don't need to say that. Has evolved over centuries. Again, understood in the word evolved, in the relationship to technology. I don't need to be specific with the time expressions. Take it out. But a lot of people, I've seen lots and lots of essays where people use these verbs in the simple past when they're talking about change. Make sure you're using these verbs with the past, with the present perfect, okay? Though his first few weeks at the helm were chaotic, Mr. Smith has become a seasoned professional who knows how to control his staff. So though his first few weeks at the helm means the boss, he's in the control center basically, were chaotic, Mr. Smith has become. So we're talking about his first few weeks and we're talking about now. Become already suggests change. He's changed from chaos to control over however long a time it took to do. Now, if it's important to let the reader know the span of time, then let the reader know the span of time. If it's not important, leave it out. If you can say something in 5 words, don't use 8, basically. That's a good point for writing. Brief. Brevity works. Okay, lastly, let's look at recently and lately. These are basically the same. You can place them at the beginning of a clause, between the helping and the main, the past participle, or at the end. Recently, lately, the media has faced criticism for its reporting. The media has recently faced criticism for its reporting. The media has faced criticism for its reporting recently. Where are you going to put them? Again, depends a little bit on emphasis. Recently, we're talking about the last little while. We're focusing on the time. The media has recently not much focus. We're just talking about a situation. And again, when you're putting the media first, then you're focusing more on the media. And the media has faced criticism. You're focusing on the criticism, not the recently. Okay. Just. Put it only between the helping verb and the past participle. The jobs report has just been released. So just and recently are not the same. Just means like very recently, I guess you could say. They're almost the same, but not the same. Just means a very short time ago. Recently can be a little bit longer time. Not so, a little bit less specific. If I say the jobs report has just been released, I'm talking the last 10 minutes, the last hour, maybe today. Recently, we're going to talk about things that are going on and on. Released is a very quick action. The media has faced criticism. This is ongoing. So when you're talking about a very short, quick, recent action, use just. When you're talking about a short time where something is happening again and again, use recently. Always and never, between the verbs, inverted with never at the beginning. So when you're starting with never, don't forget to invert. I'll show you in a second. Many people claim that the Bible has always inspired them to act. Many people claim that the Bible has never inspired them to act. Now, keep in mind, if you put always at the end, many people claim that the Bible has inspired them to act always. The always goes with act, not with inspired. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're talking about always, like for a long time or forever or never, between the two verbs. Never has the world witnessed this much change. Okay, when you're beginning, you can use never at the beginning, but then you're doing an inversion. Never has the world, remember, has and then subject and then past participle. This is called inversion. I'll make a video about that as well. When you're starting a sentence or a clause, I should say, with a negative, make sure you invert the verb and subject. I mentioned also at the beginning over a span of time. So you can use that instead of for. You can use over. I should have mentioned that a little before. Okay. I hope this was helpful. I hope you watch the first video of present perfect. It's very helpful to know when to use it, how to use it, using the time expressions correctly. It will make your writing much clearer to your readers, much clearer to listeners if you're doing it in speaking. Again, writing, you have to be specific, you have to be correct. Speaking, you can get away with a lot. So, if you have any questions, please ask me here below in YouTube. I'll be happy to answer your comments and requests. And please give me a like and subscribe to my channel if you like this video. And come back soon for other great videos on grammar, writing, IELTS, TOEFL, all that good stuff. Okay? I'll see you then. Bye-bye.